Welcome to Package, everybody. I'm Sal, and these are my parents. We're back to do this again. Gonna try it again.
It's our fault.
Yeah, well, no, I insisted. I was like, you know what? People really responded to it, and also I'm running out of books that like no one's read. But I know you haven't read any of them.
Oh no.
You know, save the ones from like I'd say 1945, maybe.
Yes.
Then only for only in passing, and then you like depressingly threw them in the garbage because that's where they would go.
They had
as-
great
as
World War
children.
II themes.
Oh yeah, no, well like Sergeant Rock and Captain America, obviously, and Batman. In fact, back in the 40s, I know they made a lot of propaganda books about Batman and Superman using assault weapons to murder Nazis. And there's one image that always stands out to me. It's a World Finest collection, and it's of Batman, Superman, and Robin throwing softballs at Hitler and Mussolini's faces, and it's like, buy war bonds and stamps and slap a Jap. And I'm like, this is not going to hold up. And it didn't. But today we're going to talk about another oldie from the past, but not nearly as old as those. This is Batman The Killing Joke, written by Alan Moore, with art by Brian Boland. And this is the version where the coloring's by John Higgins. Although Boland, the artist, was always very dissatisfied with the colors. He wanted it to be like rich and vibrant, and Higgins wanted to go with a more like monochromatic kind of style. He was very interested in like just isolating colors like oranges and purples and blues, and Boland wanted to look like a comic book. So, he recolored it in the most recent edition. And it's
Who gave the purple to the Joker?
that would be Robinson back in 1940 in Batman #1.
You don't happen to own one of those, do you?
Oh no, the studio would be a little bigger if that were the case. I think.
Gee, you folks at home, if there's one of you little kiddies who has one of those, would like to
Send
it
it
to
right
Uncle
over here.
Sal.
There's a description in the below. P.O. Box 4157. Send it over.
Was that Soupy Sales? Take all the dollars out of their pockets and
pockets.
send them to me.
Yeah. So the context for this is Batman has been going through a metamorphosis over the last, I'd say, near 100 years. In the 40s, the Joker was created as kind of like just, we're just making guys. Throw him at Batman. Here's a guy who's a clown. It's scary. Blah. Apparently, even in the 40s, clowns were terrifying. And it was a little bit of a one-off, and then people responded to him so well. I think he was actually meant to die in that issue, because they were like, oh, who cares? And that people responded to him so well that he became the premier Batman villain. In the 80s, there's this writer named Alan Moore, who you probably don't even really recognize, but the writer is one of the most prolific and most recognized auteurs in the comic book industry, probably long after we're all gone. Alan Moore wrote the definitive superhero deconstruction story Watchmen. He did a deconstruction story called Miracle Man, and he also wrote The Killing Joke, which is hailed by many as being the definitive Joker story and one of the best Batman comics of all time. He lends an air of class and respectability to the genre, or at least he'd love to hear people say that. And he is very, very, he's very English, and he's got a very deep, I'm very tired and I don't really like the industry anymore. But back in the day, he was very happy to take as many jobs as he could get. And in the 80s, mid-80s, he was finally starting to not only break away from the like corporate model, but also kind of like become his own self-anointed ambassador to all things class and comics. And so he was trying to leave DC Comics. He had a contract. They were like, don't. And they said, we need you to fulfill one more Batman book in order to get out of your contract. And so he's like, oh, well, I guess I'll write the most definitive Joker story of all time. Threw it away. He does not like this story. He thinks it's kind of like obvious and obtuse, but well, we all disagree with him, and we have the right to do so. So the idea here is it's a very isolated, self-contained story. Batman and the Joker have been involved in a battle with each other since the 40s. Of course, you can't just have it be that Batman started in, like, let's say 1937 or 39, and it's 1986. He'd be like 80 years old. There's no way. So every so often they do like what they call a reboot, where they kind of like say, okay, well, starting now, Batman is 20. And so everything is new, and so we can get new writers and new artists and tell the same old stories, but all new again, and kind of get 2 bites of the same apple, or 12 bites of the same apple at this point. So at this point in the 80s, 86, I believe, or 88, I can't recall. But Batman is, the interesting thing about what I just said about how like they kind of throw away the old stuff every decade or two is that Alan Moore was like, well, but I like those stories and I want to kind of incorporate them, so everything kind of happened in this story.
Now, how is Alan Moore still with us?
Oh yes, he is. Yeah,
Sorry,
he's still
Alan.
cranking out books,
Oh,
but
okay.
but I think his better days are behind him, unfortunately, as far as writing is concerned.
Do they ever do the theatrical trick of speaking to the audience off to the side?
Yeah, that's where they break the fourth wall and directly. Not in this story, but Moore does like to play with that convention, and they do that sometimes. There's actually some rather strong popular characters today who will do that. They will not only like look to the audience and actually refer to them, but they'll also refer to the issues that they appeared in. I haven't seen you since issue 278. That kind
House
of
of Cards, of course.
Of course, House Cards popularized that in modern parlance. Although, even another artist and writer named Grant Morrison, who is actually like Morrison would call him a contemporary of Alan Moore's. Alan Moore would call him a pariah. But Grant Morrison is really good at deconstructing superheroes, and he loves the mythology. And so he's actually famous for taking this moment. There's this great comic, Animal Man. Morrison's more on the nose. Alan Moore will kind of circumvent that trope while still giving a wink in the nod. That kind of moment, there's a scene in the Batcave where Batman is looking at the Joker, and on the view screens are all the iterations the Joker has had over the last call it 45 years. So it's more doing that, but in a more contextual way. So anyway, Batman has decided that he's going to try and talk the Joker out of having this battle with him, where he's basically saying, I've come to talk about you and me because I feel like we are going to kill each other one day. And I'd like to have at least tried once to not, or to have stopped it through words. And so he goes to Arkham Asylum, he meets with the Joker, he sits down with him. The Joker's playing solitaire, and Batman says, and he basically tries to give him his spiel, where he's like, I don't know anything about you, I don't know why we hate each other so much. And the Joker is stonewalling him, just not responding and doing the playing cards thing. Finally, he just breaks and he says, I'm talking about life and death. And he touches his hand, and when he looks back at his hand, white makeup has come off. And of course, the Joker's skin has been bleached by acid, and so it's not makeup, the Joker's look. I guess I should talk about that a little bit. In the 40s, originally when Joker was created, he was just a clown. That's scary enough. Then they established that it's actually his green skin, his red lips, his white bleached skin, it's all real. He can't take it off. And I
seem to remember there was a fire.
Okay, well, no. But there might have been fire in one version, but in all the versions, the idea is that the Joker falls into some chemicals, and when he comes out, he's bleached. In this version, he is helping some crooks navigate through a chemical plant he used to work in so they could get to the safe in a building next door. And Batman shows up to stop the robbery, and he falls into the acid, and he gets his skin bleached. In the old story, there was this idea that there was this villain called the Red Hood who wore this suppository-shaped helmet and a tuxedo and a big cape, and he had a red hood with no expression. It was just blank because he had a two-way mirror inside. I think in the comic from 1945 or 50 or whatever, he's teaching a class on forensics to some kids, and he's like, and here's the story, here's the case I never won, and it was who was the Red Hood. And to spoil the story, the Red Hood is the Joker. And the idea was that the Joker was the Red Hood originally. He was a crook named the Red Hood, and he needed to swim through some acid, and when he took the helmet off, it seeped through and it bleached his skin. We have Alan Moore's kind of retelling of that story, which is why I bring it up. So anyway, Batman talks to the Joker, and it turns out it's not really the Joker at all. It's an imposter, meaning the Joker's escaped Arkham. And so then we see where the Joker is. Immediately, he's at an abandoned, dilapidated carnival that is kind of for sale, and it's kind of overrun. And he's negotiating the terms of the sale with this carnival owner. which is, for me, always funny because who doesn't know who the Joker is at this point? Like, why would this carnival guy, entertain a conversation with the Joker and think he's going to get paid for it? While we get the tour, we also get the origin, or an origin of the Joker. Because that's one thing, it's like the origin of Wolverine. It's one of those stories that they always said they would never tell, and then
they did.
They gave it to somebody who actually knew what they were doing, and so they do. And they kind of what they do is what comics will do is when they have a character that's like almost too good for an origin, whatever you imagine in your head's gonna be better than we come up with. Sometimes, most of the time, the comic book industry will go, fuck it, we'll just make some money. So let's do it anyway. And we'll let the test of time determine whether that was a good idea or not. Either way, we make the shekels, and then history will be the judge as to whether or not that was worth it. In this case, Alan Moore's version, they all agree that's the Joker's version. But even more in his writing, distances himself from the origin. He says he has a moment where Joker says, "Sometimes I remember one way, other times another. If I have a past, I prefer it to be multiple choice." Just illustrating his madness. And he kills the guy and takes the carnival. Which you would expect.
So was the Joker ever a good guy?
Actually, it's interesting you should ask that, because right now there's a story by Sean Gordon Murphy, which he's the writer and the artist on it. It's an alternate reality story where the Joker is force-fed a bunch of antipsychotic pills by Batman. And it straightens him out and makes him sane. And so he decides Batman is the reason why Gotham is so messed up and why he was the Joker in the first place. And so he commits a war on Batman and crime in Gotham. He becomes Gotham's White Knight, as opposed to Batman being the Dark Knight. And I'm sure it won't end well for him, but for right now, he's kind of like the hero in that story.
Interesting.
It's one of the few stories where the Joker's the hero. Sometimes the Joker is like a force of nature that they direct at a problem they have that's bigger than the Joker, but other times the Joker's always been evil. For the Joker, he's a character that is practically a force of nature. He has no alias, he has no origin, he has no family. We see that in this, but he never refers to it. Even in this story, we only see it. Moore tells us the story, but Joker doesn't say, I was this guy. We just view it through this lens of unreliability. But yeah, the Joker is a scary story that criminals tell each other when they want to give each other a fright. That's how evil and enduring the Joker is.
So he was never a good guy and something happened to him.
No.
And then he became...
In his story, he was like a schlub who worked at Ace Chemicals, who quit to become a comedian, but it turns out he's a lousy comedian. And his story is a little tragic. He has this wife, she's pregnant, and they live in this really crappy apartment. It's implied it's in New Orleans because they're eating crawfish.
Yeah.
But... he has this wife, Jeannie, and she's pregnant, and all he wants to do is get a laugh. He went for his set, he comes home, she says, "Hey, how'd it go?" He goes, "I kind of messed up the punchline." And he's really insecure, and he's very self-effacing, and he's very anti-Joker, very weak and timid and desperate. So I wouldn't call him a good guy, I'd call him, pathetic. He takes this job from these two crooks because he realizes he lives in this crappy place and he wants to set up his wife and his kid and himself in a better position. And he knows that because he quit the job at the chemical factory to pursue his dream of being a comedian, and he's not very good at it, that they're in these dire straits because of himself. So he makes another bad decision, which is to take this job from these two crooks who are looking to, as I said, break into the building next door to the chemical plant. And he's like, it's a labyrinth in there. We need somebody who used to work there who knows the system. So
he's the guy.
The guy who would be Joker says, how am I going to get through this place? And he says, oh, we've got that for you because the crooks have a Red Hood costume. And the idea is that the Red Hood is kind of like an urban legend that criminals use. There is no one Red Hood. There are many Red Hoods. Wow. And the criminals use that to obfuscate their crimes and kind of pin the blame all on this phantom. So he's like, you're going to dress up as the Red Hood. Because he has this notorious reputation, it'll probably spook off any hangers-on or passerby who might notice you, and he'll get through. So they put him in a Red Hood costume and they take him to the chemical plant. So there's two concurring plots running simultaneously. We've got the Joker origin plot, which does have a hard break, and then finally we resume with the present day plot. Mm-hmm. But then we have the present day plot of what is the Joker's plan and how horrible is it going to be? Because every time they tell a Joker story, they got to top themselves. They got to top it because the Joker is such a iconic, classic villain. You got to tell some kind of epic story. Otherwise, what's the use of using him? You're not going to do a story where the Joker is going to break into a bank and he's going to steal some jewels.
Yeah.
It's got to be epic because he's so theatrical and because he's the best Batman villain they've got. And so every time he breaks out, there's always this meta conversation between Gordon and Batman where they're like, what's he going to do now? Almost like, why? What's the writer going... How's the writer going to punish us today? We see some scenes of Batman in the Batcave, and he's looking up the Joker, and he's talking to Alfred, and he says, like, how could two people who don't know each other at all hate so much? Alfred's like, I don't know. Search me, buddy. I don't know, man. Keep your musings to yourself.
I just work here.
Yeah, exactly. And we go to Commissioner Gordon's place. Now,
By the way, he survives throughout all of this.
Yeah, Alfred makes it the whole time.
Not just Alfred, Commissioner Gordon.
Yeah, Commissioner Gordon too. Yeah, Gordon. Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why people like Batman so much and why it's so easy to talk about him, because you know who Gordon is.
Yes.
There's only like 5 players in the Bat mythos. It's like Batman, Commissioner Gordon, Alfred, maybe Robin, and a villain. And then you're ready to go. You can hit the ground running. And you don't need any context. It's why you can cross over Batman with any character.
Yeah, the continuity is always there.
Exactly. Like, you know who they are without having any explanation. Now we can do whatever we want. And they've done many things with Gordon over the years. Even most recently, over the last couple of years, they made him Batman.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he goes to he hits the gym, he cuts his hair, he shaves his stash, and he puts on like a kind of like exosuit, and he becomes Batman because Batman's incapacitated. He does a decent job, but the readers all rejected it, so they ended it a little prematurely. But so we're at Gordon's place. He's having Daddy-Daughter Day with his daughter Barbara Gordon, who in this continuity had become Batgirl, which was another like element to the Batman-Gordon relationship. Batman and Gordon, they're these two hardened men who've decided they're going to commit themselves to a battle against crime, and also I'm going to secretly recruit your daughter in my mission too. It's like, ugh. It's always very dicey, his relationship with Barbara Gordon. Some creators in like the cartoons, for example, really like the idea that like Batman and Barbara are dating, and for me it's very incestuous, and I don't care for it. And thankfully, most people don't either. But so the context for Barbara Gordon is she's a librarian. She's Gordon's daughter, and she has been Batgirl. With this story, because it stands on its own and it could be anywhere at any time, it's kind of unclear as to whether she even was Batgirl. But because this story was so well received, they said, okay, it's in continuity now. So now Batgirl has a whole new story. Yeah, because we changed things for Batgirl in profound and dramatic ways. So they're Gordon and his daughter are talking. They get a knock on the door. They open the door, and it's the Joker. And the Joker shoots her in the abdomen, shattering her spine. Yeah, it's meant to be shocking and horrifying. And many feminist authors will also talk about how like this is kind of like a pivotal moment in the use of female characters in comics. She's certainly, if nothing else, a plot device because she is used throughout the story. So Joker shoots her in the spine, and his goons beat Gordon into unconsciousness. And Joker has a monologue where he basically makes reference to books, because Barbara's a librarian, and broken spines, etc., because he shatters her spine.
Because books break because of their...
Yeah, and then he, of course... But he does this for like several panels, and then he finally says, these literary conversations are so dry. Anyway... take Gordon, I've got work with Barbara. And so he undresses her and takes photos of her naked.
Interesting. Why would they throw that in?
Why would they throw that in? Because it's all part of the Joker's machinations. Joker has a plan. He needs Gordon. And in order to facilitate the work he needs for Gordon, he needs to take his daughter, break her spine, and then photograph her naked while she writhes in pain and agony on the floor of her apartment.
Awful.
Yes, and it's the savaging of Barbara Gordon that makes people so upset. It's also the undressing. People think like, well, what does that mean? Did Joker violate her, or did he just take pictures of her? When I read it, I thought it was just he took pictures. I could perceive the Joker as kind of an asexual being. He's too busy for sex. He's too insane. He can't really. He wouldn't even know what to do. I mean, he does, but he's like, why? Like, I'm above that at this point. He'd find it vulgar. We go to a hospital. Barbara's there. Batman and Barbara talk for a second. She says, like, there's something in his eyes, the Joker's eyes, that says that he's not messing around anymore. Not that what he did was so horrible, and that's really what indicates that he's not messing around anymore, but, the look in his eyes.
Now, the Joker doesn't have his own YouTube channel, does he?
I mean, well, he's... I think he would for a little while in the context, but I think he'd get bored of it. The Joker loves to reinvent himself. But no. And if he did, he would also probably get flagged for content violation.
Yeah, probably.
So... Then we go to the carnival that the Joker has recently acquired. Yes. Gordon is at the carnival where he is met by diminutive freaks. The idea being that, like, the carnival kind of retained all the freak show that was part of the carnival. So, like, all the freaks, like the fat lady
they're still living there.
And Joker has kind of incorporated them into his gang. He's got the hoods for when he needs to do things outside, but when he's got the real work at the carnival, he's got these horrible monster people. But these little freaks take Gordon's clothes off and they put him into bondage and then lay him before the Joker, who's created like a kind of throne out of carnival pieces and baby doll toys. The baby dolls could be symbolic for his lost child, but that's an analysis for another time. The long and the short of it is, Joker kicks him onto a, I want to say it's like a roller coaster. One of those things where it's like you get into the cart and you go through like a fun house kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so
it's on a track.
It's on a track. You go in, and then you can come out the other side. Mm-hmm. And so he puts Gordon in there, and the little freaks are in the car with him, and they cattle prod him if he tries to leave. And the attraction within it is the photos he took of his daughter. Oh. So Gordon's forced to see his horribly like savage daughter in a state of undress, and the idea is...
And in great pain.
And in great pain, exactly. And so he's forced to do this until Batman shows up. So he's just on this loop, just forced to undergo this. Also, Joker sings a song about going insane. And it's horrible because I love the visual, by the way, in this 9-panel grid, where we see the doors open as Batman is trying to find the Joker. And each time that Batman tries to follow on a lead, Gordon is going further and further into the carnival, into this horror labyrinth of horrors, until finally he gets invited. Like somebody delivers 2 tickets to the carnival for Batman, and so he's like, world's greatest detective indeed. But the Joker's conceit is that everyone has within themselves the potential to go insane. And all it takes is one bad day to make it work. And so the Joker has orchestrated the worst day in Gordon's life to prove that this pillar of the system, the commissioner of the police, can fall and can go insane. And he's doing it in a way to kind of illustrate, like, something bad happened to me. And, of course, the parallel being that Batman also
can fall into that.
Well, Batman has already. The Batman is insane. That him becoming Batman is the result of one bad day making you go insane. And at least that seems to be Moore's thesis. Mm-hmm. So, Gordon basically recedes into himself, and Joker takes that as a sign that he's succeeded. He throws him into a cage, and he's like, we gotta wait for Batman, because I know he's coming, because I invited him. Then we find out more about this schlub, who the Joker was. The idea being that while he was meeting with the Hoods for a second time, the police show up, and the guy's like, the crooks are like, don't tell him anything. And they take him outside, and it turns out that Jeannie, his pregnant wife, died. She was testing a baby bottle heater, and there was a short, and she got electrocuted. And so he's like, oh. And so the cop says, you can meet me down at the morgue, but if I were you, I'd go back in there and have another drink. So he goes back inside, and he talks to the Hoods, and the Hoods are like, oh man, that really sucks. Anyway, so we'll see you tomorrow. And he says, oh, there's no reason for me to do that now. I have no family to take care of. Right. And they're like, oh, you don't understand. We're going to do this one way or the other. And, tomorrow you're with us, and you can bury your lady in luxury. let's go. So we go to the chemical plant. He puts on the Red Hood costume, and he screws it up. You know, like, they go, which way do we need to go? He goes, oh, it looks like they must have changed it when I was gone. And they're like, are you kidding me? And then a security guard shows up, and then he kills the other two guys, like the two hoods, and he tries to get away, and the police show up, and Batman is there, and then Batman scares him because Batman thinks that he's the Red Hood, who's a villain he's fought before. And he doesn't know he's this pathetic loser who's just scared out of his mind and, you know, going through a really hard time right now. And so he tries to escape Batman and jumps into this vat of chemicals. And then when he comes out, he is the Joker.
There he is.
And when he takes off the hood and he sees what's happened to himself, he goes insane. And in this perfectly illustrated visual of the Joker kind of like descending into laughter, which I always like. It's a great image, and
It is.
and it's one of the most iconic images of the Joker for the 20th century. So then Batman shows up at the carnival, a little late, but better late than never. So and the story basically ends with Batman and the Joker battling, and they throw out all their bag of tricks. The Joker uses acid. Batman throws batarangs. He meets up with, and then Joker runs into the funhouse. And alone for a second, Batman goes to recover Gordon, and Gordon weeps into Batman's chest and then says, like, "I'm okay. I need you to go in there and you need to bring him in by the book to show him that our way works." Proving that the Joker's machinations did not work. He did not make Gordon go insane. But of course, the idea is the Killing Joke is a reference to the end of the story where the Joker tells a joke. And the joke illustrates the duality and the intrinsic connection between Batman and the Joker, and how they're basically two sides of the same coin. They're both insane. And I like the irony of Gordon, who actually is saying to Batman, like, we need to show that our way works, even though it doesn't because you're Batman. I rely on a crazy person who dresses like a monster to go out and punch people.
Right. Fight crime.
Yeah, that proves the system does not work. If I rely on Batman, my system is broken. And while he's going through the funhouse, the Joker's on the PA system taunting him. And he basically is kind of tossing out his thesis about how madness is the only sane response to this reality we live in. Did you know that the last World War was over how many telegraph poles that Germany owed its war creditors? Like, that's insane. That's insane. What I'm doing is nowhere near as insane as how the real world operates. And Batman has he's like, whatever. He's shutting it out. But I love it because Joker comes really close to Batman's origin, where he says, like, what is it with you? I know that you must have had a bad day too, right? Like, maybe your girlfriend was killed by the mob or something. Like, he's really close, but he's not quite there. And he says, but it's something like that, I bet. This, of course, I like the Joker not knowing who Batman is, or not caring who Batman is, but I like the dialogue in this scene, because normally they write Joker kind of like, he doesn't talk like us, but this is a Joker who is grounded, and because he's decided to do this, it brings him back into who he was, into the man he was, where he stutters and he kind of and he speaks kind of like very colloquially. But he says, like, everything that we live in is a joke, and I understand why you don't get it, and why you don't see why it's so funny. Like, why aren't you laughing? And then Batman smashes through a mirror, getting the Joker, and he says, because I've heard it before, and it wasn't funny the first time. And then they smack each other around a bit. Actually, as a little kid, you got me a book called, I don't remember what it was called, but it was a Batman. Like, it's just a big book of Batman, and it had a lot of visuals and images from the 70 years of Batman's history. And one of them is pages from this book, which always caught my imagination. But the image
my fault.
Yeah, kind of. But the image of the Joker sticking his fingers into Batman's mask and pulling the mask down.
Yeah.
Because it perfectly illustrates how silly Batman is. Like, at that moment, you're like, oh, right, putting on a silly-ass costume and a mask and a big cape, like, you'd be encumbered. And I love that visual, because more is just taking a little dig at Batman. The idea of, like, it's stupid, though. Don't take it too seriously.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, as a kid, looking at this was a book that was on the back shelf at Pegasus Enterprises in Booton. And I didn't get it. I was like, it's an image of the Joker holding a camera. It's seemingly innocuous, But if you have a higher level of thinking, you're going like, why is that so threatening? Like, why is that so scary? And as a kid, I was like, oh, it's just bad. It's just him holding it, and it was a single issue, which always appealed to me because I liked the done-in-ones because I could only buy like one book at a time, and so if I could get a complete story, I was getting my money's worth. But I remember asking the guy, like, hey, can I get that one? He's like, oh, you don't want that one. Like, you can't have that one because it's too adult. You know, this is one that actually I didn't even get a chance to read. Dark Knight Returns. He sold that to me at age 13. He's like, well, you're at the age. This is your bar mitzvah. Here you go. But this one, he was like, mm-mm. And I didn't get this one until I think like 15. So you can rest easy knowing I was not reading that it's at the age of like 11. You're like, I don't understand why she's naked. But
and his mother gave him this.
Yeah. No, I bought this on my own. But, yeah. So anyway, Batman beats the Joker. And the Joker almost gets one up on him where he pulls out his gun, but it's empty. And it actually does one of those little, like, gun flag things. Yeah. And he says, damn it. Well, what are you waiting for? You know, now's your chance to beat me up and parade me in front of the public gallery. Like, and Batman says, I don't want to beat on you. That's not why I'm here. Like, you do these things, and it makes me have to beat on you. But the fact is, that's not why that's not how we should be.
So, what do you think would be Batman's ultimate wish for the Joker?
He displays it. He says basically, you know, he basically forces the conversation that he was trying to have at the beginning of the book right now, where he's like, "This is it. This is the crossroads for us." You've crossed so many lines at this point, but the fact is, I have you for a second, and we don't need to kill each other. We could stop. Like, I could help you. The two of us together, like, I could rehabilitate you, and you don't have to be alone anymore. And I think that the Batman's wish for the Joker is for him to just, like, for him to knock it off. But, I mean, you know, that's like telling a person who has no legs to just get up and walk around. Like, it's insanity, you know? You have to work towards something, and you can't just stop. And the Joker illustrates that by looking at Batman. And I love the visual of Brian Boland's pencils, especially in this version, because there's another version that he does with the recoloring. He also takes that opportunity to change the art, which I hate when they do that. Because who you were 20 years ago is not the person you are now. And you made this then, and you shouldn't remake it now. I'm always of that opinion. So, but the image of the Joker, he frowns and he says, no, I'm sorry, but it's too late for that. It's the most real the Joker is with Batman, where he says like he says, I'm sorry, but it's too late for that. And it's just such a real moment between the two of them. And I love that image of the Joker because it's almost like his sanity escapes for just a second to say no, to reject his offer. But then he says, you know, it's funny, this situation reminds me of a joke. And narratively, I think it's the joke that he screws up when he was with his wife.
When he comes home and says,
I screwed up the punchline.
Right.
So he tells this joke, and he tells it, and he stutters over himself, and he really screws up this joke, which I really like, because it's like, for a moment, the man he was escapes and takes over for a second. But he tells this joke because Batman says, I could help you. And he says, this reminds me of a joke. And the joke is this. He says, there's these two guys in a lunatic asylum, and then one day they decide they don't want to be there anymore. So they both decide they're going to escape. They're on the rooftop, and there's these roofs next to each other, and a big chasm. And the first guy jumps, he immediately makes it across, and the other guy is too afraid to jump. And he says, well, I've got it. I've got my flashlight, and I'll shine a light across, and you can walk across the beam to the other side. And the other guy says, what do you think, I'm crazy? You turned off when I was halfway across. And I love that joke because, you know, I don't really think it's terribly funny, but it illustrates the madness of Batman and the Joker, and how Joker's like, you can rehabilitate me? You dress like a bat and jump around in the dark. You're as crazy as I am. And so the two guys in the lunatic asylum are Batman and the Joker. And Batman's the one who jump across and the Joker's too afraid. Or Joker's the one who jump across. I never really thought about it too hard. But the two guys in the lunatic asylum are Batman and the Joker. And then the Joker laughs at his own joke. And then Batman laughs at the joke as well. And it's one of those images of Batman smiling, which is always like, wow, I've never seen that before. But the two of them just fall apart into a giggle fest. and as the rest of the police show up. And the story ends with the rain filling this puddle, and that's the end of the story. Now, there's a lot of interpretation, and in fact, Grant Morrison would tell you that the killing joke is that Joker tells this joke, and it inspires Batman to kill the Joker. And so at the end of the story, Batman murders the Joker. I don't like any of those ideas. I think it's just that, like, it's just this one moment of honesty between these two characters before they do fulfill the idea of that Batman was worried about, which is that they'll kill each other one day. Although, yeah. But then again, why would it be the killing joke then? And so I guess I pose the question to you guys: what is the killing, or what does the killing joke mean? I know that it references the joke he tells, but why is it the killing joke? Why is it the joke that kills? You know, why did Moore call the whole thing the killing joke if nobody really dies in the story except like random people? So that's interpretation. I don't know. It's worth discussing, but I don't know. In any case, so the idea is it starts out as an innocuous, oh, Batman the Joker, right? And then like, oh,
here we go again.
Oh shit, it gets real dark real fast. But yeah, so that's the killing joke. What do you think?
Interesting.
Right? Pretty good.
Good book.
Right? It's not bad.
Good book.
Does anyone ever ask the author what he means at the end?
Oh yeah, they do. He hates that.
Yeah, I'm sure, but
because he will not answer that question. But that's the great part of a time. That's why I think it's a timeless work, because not only is it like not connected to any story that took place before or after, but you can read it over and over and over again, and it never loses its luster. And in fact, you might even find something new that you didn't find before. Incidentally, after this story was written and so highly regarded, Batman's creative team said, that happened. Okay, so Batgirl's a cripple now. And so Batgirl's in a wheelchair, and she can't be Batgirl no more. And while that was the conjecture about how that came about, I think Alan Moore asked permission. He's like, I want to have Barbara Gordon get paralyzed. And it's kind of a main character, and everybody kind of knew that since Alan Moore wrote it, they were definitely going to use it in main continuity. But just in case they didn't want to do that, they could say it's an Elseworld story or a story that took place over there. The quote from the editor back then, or attributed to him, was, yeah, sure, cripple the bitch. Like, just, who cares? Very dismissively, we're not really telling any Batgirl stories anyway, knock yourself out. And Moore himself, 20 years later, has said, when he's asked about it, and he will comment on it, he says, I went too far. I feel like I really put Barbara through the ringer, and I really shouldn't have. Well, I immediately go, no, you didn't. You're 20 years older. You're an old man. You're a father now. No. Just like Spielberg gets really upset when anybody talks about Close Encounters of a Third Kind. Remember Close Encounters? Richard Dreyfuss? And they work really hard in that movie to show that his family sucks, so he can abandon it at the end. And he says, like, whenever he talks about Close Encounters, he goes, I would have probably had him wind up with his family back at the end of the movie. And I'm like, yeah, of course, because you have a family. You're not a single man telling a story. Like, you're a dad. You can't touch that movie. Don't go back. So I always question asking creators, especially the longer there's the
amount of time has passed.
Yeah, it's dicey. But arguably, they did something more interesting. Batgirl. It's a girl, Batman. Right? That's the most one-dimensional interpretation of Batgirl. I want to do Batman, but I also want to draw girls, so I'll do Batgirl. And yes, Batgirl has an origin, and she's very interesting in her own way.
So is she like the equivalent to Robin?
She kind of, except Batman brought Robin in. Batgirl decided to become Batgirl on her own. She was homaging Batman. She sees Batman, and she's like, I'll do that too. And so Batman lets her into the inner circle, but he didn't train her or bring her in. Also, then we don't have to tell as many Batgirl stories. Like, Robin, he lives there. If Batman goes out, he's going to know about it. If Batman goes out, Batgirl will only know about it every fourth adventure. But ultimately, what they did with Barbara Gordon was she's in a wheelchair, but she's also an incredibly intelligent person and a crime fighter in her own right. And so later in a book called Suicide Squad, they established that Barbara Gordon becomes a kind of like computer and tech wizard, and she becomes what's known as the Oracle. And so she fights crime, from behind the scenes, and she funnels information. She'll hack like computer systems and like surveillance cameras and feed information and advanced knowledge about criminals or superheroes or villains to the superhero community. But yeah, I love what they did with Barbara afterwards. It's kind of like, well, we gotta use it. We gotta keep this story, but we also lose Barbara Gordon as Batgirl. But I guess we can do
It's
there's
just
no
as well
magic.
because there was no future for Batgirl.
Yeah, it's like, what are you gonna do with
every
her?
time
Well, there's
Batgirl
no
did something,
magic cape.
you were taking a little something away from Batman.
See, that's how I feel too. Like, I don't like redundancies. I don't like multiple Bat characters. Nowadays, he's got like 9 Robins and like all these people, and I'm like,
He could have had a magic cape though. That when she put on,
oh, it lets her. I think that kind of diminishes the sacrifice. You know, like
That's true. Yes.
That's very hand wavy. I mean,
it's like having your cake and eating it too.
It's true.
You know,
But yeah, and actually what's interesting is after they rebooted everything, every 10, 20 years they do that, they kept this until 2011 when they rebooted everything. And when they rebooted everything, they said, first they said like, maybe it happened, but she got better.
Sure.
And then they were like, maybe it didn't happen at all, and she never had to get better because she was never crippled in the first place. And then they were like, nah, she did. This had happened, but she got better. Which I hate. I hate when they do that because you diminish the iconic nature of the story by saying that it either didn't happen or that the weight and gravity of it happened. She's paralyzed. That's horrible and it sucks, but like you got to live with it now.
or it was a mistake, or we shouldn't have.
Yeah, well, that's what they're admitting basically.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we should never have done that. Or and you know what? Arguably, they've done some pretty stellar Batgirl stories since they fixed her. But it took them 20 years to come up with them. Incidentally, the Barbara Gordon being crippled is one of the 2 iconic images for Batman that I always liked that they undid. There's another one where the Joker kills Robin. The second one. The first Robin gets too big for the little booties and shorts, and so he puts on another costume, he becomes somebody else. And so Batman kind of like sat in the new interpretation of him recruiting Jason Todd Robin, he's kind of like, he has this guy. He's got his friend. He leaves him. Like his surrogate son, grows up in empty nest syndrome sets in, and he's like, he just needs someone to put on this Robin costume and come out with him because it's a lonely business. And so he kind of hastily recruits this young street urchin person, and he lasts like a year or 2, and then Joker kills him. Because and that illustrates like Batman's lack of planning and his lack of foresight and his desperation and how he shouldn't have rushed into that. And so for a long time there was a Robin suit in memoriam to Jason in the cave, and it's like the giant penny and the giant dinosaur and all these iconic, the Batmobile itself. In the Batcave there's also the Robin suit in memory of Jason, and I love that image. And then they brought it back to life. And I won't talk about how. So let's just wrap up
For another day.
Yeah, the Killing Joke is damn good. I'll put a link in the description box below this video so you can pick up a copy. This is, I think, the 3rd or 2nd printing. It's signed by the colorist.
Oh,
So
very nice.
yeah, it's worthless because it's like the 2nd or 3rd printing. The 1st printing, that would be worth something. But still, John Higgins was a nice guy, and I felt bad that he got kind of bilked out of his credit, because every subsequent version of the Killing Joke, when Brian Boland recolored it, that's the version you're going to get.
They're going to get.
Because they're not going to bring the old color version back. Closest thing to insanity you'll hopefully ever get. We'll see you guys next time with an all-new episode. And thank you guys so much for joining me today.
Bye.
Great to have you. And we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
It was fun. Bye.
Yeah.